Hi guys, welcome to my very first YouTube video. I'm so happy you're here. I'm Sierra and I own Sierra Stitches, which is my very own crochet small business. I crochet adorable plushies like this, potted flowers and plants like these. I also make crochet flowers just like these. You can use this code that I'm going to put on the screen for 40% off any of my patterns that are available in my Etsy shop. In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to wrap your very own crochet bouquet. Now this is a topic that I get a ton of questions on Instagram, and I've wrapped probably about 200 or 300 bouquets myself, so I don't think I'm an expert, but I do have some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way that I'd like to share with you guys. All the materials that you're going to need to wrap your very own crochet bouquet are going to be in the description box below, so please take a look at that, but I'm going to show you right now what I personally use. So the first item you're going to need is this floral paper. I get this paper personally from Shein, but you can also get this type of paper from other places like Amazon, Temu, or AliExpress. You can also just search it up on Google by typing in floral wrapping paper. I prefer to use this type of paper because I'm not sure if you can tell, but it's waterproof, and I don't obviously water my crochet flowers, but what's good about this is that it doesn't crinkle. So you can fold it as many times as you want and it's still going to remain nice and crisp, which is why I prefer to use this type of paper. The second thing you're going to need for your bouquet is some mesh. So I use this decorative mesh. As you can see, it has a bunch of pearls at the top and it's also kind of see-through, so this is definitely a must. The next one is optional. I also use these eucalyptus stems. I also get these online and you don't really need them, but I think it adds a nice touch to have a bit of greenery within your bouquet. It kind of gives it more of a real feeling even though it's a crochet bouquet. And the last thing you're gonna need is your flowers. So for these bouquets, I personally recommend having about anywhere from like 5 to 9 flowers is my personal preference. If it's too small, meaning if you have too few flowers, it's not going to be that interesting to look at. And if you have too many flowers, then it's going to be too heavy to hold, too heavy to wrap, and I just overall wouldn't recommend it. You're also going to need some extra green yarn, the same yarn that you use to wrap your flowers with. And you're also going to need some decorative ribbon to put your bouquet together at the very end. Before we get started on how to wrap your own bouquet, I'm going to give you guys 3 tips that I've learned myself over the time that I've been selling these bouquets. Tip number 1 is going to be to have a variety of flowers within your bouquet. Of course, you can always make a bouquet with the same types of flowers, but personally, I think that it's a little bit more visually interesting when you have different types of flowers. So for example, in the bouquet that we're going to be wrapping together today, which are these flowers, we have roses, we have tulips, we have these little puffy flowers, and also the flowers are complementary to each other, which brings us into tip number 2. You want to start by having a color palette that works together. So it doesn't need to match, it just needs to go. So for example, I've had bouquets in the past where I've done them all in pastel colors. So I had like pastel orange, pastel blue, pastel purple, but it all worked because they were all pastel. Nothing really stood out, it just blended together very nicely. And in this bouquet that we're going to be wrapping today, you can see they're all white and pink, and you also have a little touch of gold, which is going to complement everything and bring it all together. So that's tip number 2, is to pick a color palette that works. Tip number 3 is how to make your flowers look super clean and have no yarn fuzzies whatsoever. As you can see here in this, the yarn does not have that many yarn fuzzies, and in the next clips I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. Before you watch that, I just want to say this is of course an optional step, and I also would recommend to test it out on a scrap piece of yarn first so that you don't burn your actual real flowers. So after you finish crocheting your flowers, they'll look like this. There'll be a lot of yarn fuzzies all around the edge of your project. So for this tip, you're going to need a lighter, and what you'll do is you'll just hold the flame around the edges of your flowers just for a few seconds, and that will remove all of the yarn fuzzies. Be sure to not hold the flame in one spot for too long or else you'll burn your project. But as you can see, it does make a huge difference between this side where I've just done the flame versus not. And here's side by side so you can see what a huge difference that this small tip makes. You can also see what a huge difference it makes on this rose. So for all of my bouquets, I'll take the time to do this step just to give my bouquets an overall cleaner and more detailed look. Now that I told you guys a little bit about where I get my supplies from, what supplies I personally use, and the 3 tips that I recommend for the crochet bouquets, let's get started and learn how to wrap your very own bouquet. First, make sure you have all your materials ready to go. To wrap your bouquet, you're only going to need 1 sheet of the floral wrapping paper. Using the crease line, cut your floral wrapping paper in half. Take these 2 halves and place them off to the side for now. I recommend starting with the arrangement by choosing 1 or 2 flowers that really stand out. For this instance, I chose the tulips because they are bright white and also they have those long leaves that really stick out. As you're arranging your flowers, be sure to place them at different heights and also make sure that you're not placing similar colors too close to each other. This will make your bouquet overall more visually interesting because you'll have different colors to look at, and also your eye will look along different levels because of the different heights. Arranging your flowers is the most time-consuming process of wrapping a bouquet. Be sure to take your time until you're 100% happy with how your bouquet looks. Once you're satisfied with the places that you've placed your flowers, be sure that once again they're all different heights and that the stems are different lengths. The next step is to add in your greenery. I like to place these wherever I notice any gaps or holes in my bouquet. After you've decided on the position of everything, we'll now begin to wrap it together. Taking the same green yarn you used for the stems, cut off a small scrap piece of yarn. Take your piece of yarn and tie it around the front of the bouquet where all of the flowers intersect each other. Once you put it across the front, be sure to crisscross it in the back. Then pull it tightly. You're going to go ahead and tie 2 double knots, and then once you're done, you're going to cut off any excess yarn. I repeat this process of tying several knots about 2 or 3 times, or until I feel that the bouquet is securely put together. You should tie several knots around the top, middle, and bottom of all of the stems. They'll look like this once you've finished. Next, I like to take my time and arrange all of the flowers again, making sure that all of the flowers face forward and all of the leaves are in the perfect position. The next step is to measure and cut your decorative mesh. I like to lay the mesh on top of the bouquet and cut it to the same width that the flowers are. Take your mesh and lay it on top of the flowers to cover all of the knots we've tied along the stem. I like to pinch it at one point and hold it with my fingers and adjust it until I like the positioning. Using another scrap piece of yarn, tie the mesh to your flowers. One good thing about these crochet bouquets is that you can always make changes. Just like me, I added in this little piece of greenery at the very end. Grab 1/2 of the paper that you cut earlier. First, we're going to be starting with the left-hand side. So when you look at your wrapping paper, you want to have the curved side be on the left and the side that you cut be on the right. Lay your wrapping paper on the table. You're going to fold it so that at the very top it forms an X shape. So as you can see here, I'm focusing on the X shape at the top. Once you've got your X-shaped paper, place your bouquet on top. Remember, we're starting with the left-hand side of the bouquet. I like to place my flowers sort of diagonally skewed towards the left so that the paper is visible in the top left corner of the flowers. Now we're going to secure the paper. Take each of the 2 sides of the paper and pinch it towards the center, making sure that you cover your green yarn that you had used to wrap the bouquet earlier. Once again, take each side and pinch it towards the center, making sure you hold it in place. Using the same method as earlier, take a scrap piece of yarn to tie the paper and secure it to the bouquet. This might take a little bit of practice to be able to do it with one hand, because remember, you still have to hold the paper with one hand while you're wrapping it. You can always ask a friend or family member to hold it for you, just like when you're wrapping a present. We're going to repeat these same steps for the other side of the paper. So for this one, you want to make sure that the curved part is on the right hand side and that the part that you cut is on the left hand side. Again, fold the paper the same way, making sure that you have an X shape at the top. Next, you can place your bouquet on top of the paper. Remember, this is going to be the right hand side, so make sure that your flowers are skewed a little bit towards the right this time. After you've placed your flowers, be sure to secure the paper. At this point, your flowers should look like this. We only have one last step left, which is to add a ribbon. Cut off a piece around 2 to 3 feet long of your decorative ribbon. Find the center or middle portion of the ribbon and place it along the front of the bouquet, being sure you cover the green yarn that we used to tie it together. Then, crisscross it in the front and tie a knot. This might be a little tricky, but your focus here should be on covering that green piece of yarn that we used to tie the bouquet together. Next, you're going to tie a bow. There's plenty of ways to do this, but this is just how I do it. I take the left hand piece of ribbon and make a loop, and then I take the right hand side and pull it through. And then I spend a lot of time adjusting, making sure that the ribbon isn't twisted and that both sides are even. And the very last detail that I like to make is to cut a little triangle piece of ribbon at the very bottom to give it this cute triangle shape. Lastly, I take the lighter and I burn the very ends of the ribbon just to make sure that it can't fray. Ta-da! You're finished. Now you have your very own beautifully wrapped crochet bouquet. So for this part of the video, I wanted to do a little bit about me, about my crochet story and my journey about how this all started, how Sierra Stitches was created. So forgive me if I'm looking down. I have my iPad here with a bunch of questions that you guys all asked me. So without further ado, let's start. So one common question that I get a lot is, how old was I when I first started crocheting? What made me want to start crocheting? And how did I learn? So these three questions are all tied in together. So I was about 5 or 6 years old when I started crocheting. I was taught by my grandma, who also taught me how to knit and sew. And the reason she started teaching me how to crochet was because of her own background. So she grew up in Germany during World War II, where it was a horrible situation. They had to actually make all of their own clothes. So she had to learn this skill because she didn't really have much of a choice. And she knew that it was extremely important to be self-reliant and be able to have these skills. So many years down the road, I came along as her granddaughter and she decided to teach me. So I really didn't have much of a choice. I don't remember if I ever said like, oh, I want to learn to crochet. In my memory, maybe this is wrong, I more so remember as you need to learn. So I first started learning crocheting by making just squares, like little doilies or scarves or just random rectangles, just to practice all of the stitches. And I was actually not bullied, but people definitely made fun of me in school, like in middle school and elementary school, for having this skill, because they were like, oh my gosh, you're such a grandma. But look at me now. It definitely helped down the line. Another question that I also get a lot is, what made me start to pursue a crochet business? And my honest answer is, this was never planned. It all kind of happened just it kind of had like a snowball effect, and it just started happening. So long story short, my grandma was very important to me. Like I said, she taught me how to crochet, and in like the summer of 2021, unfortunately her health started declining, so I couldn't see her as much and I couldn't share my creations with her as much. So I decided to make an Instagram page, Sierra Stitches, just as like a video and photo diary, just to show my friends and family. And I never expected anything to come out of it. I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna share some photos whenever I make something. But lo and behold, people started following me and asking me for things, and I think one of my very first reels that I ever made ended up getting like almost 250,000 views, which is just so astonishing to me. And I ended up realizing that even though crochet is my hobby, I can actually make a business out of it and earn a lot of money out of it, because I'm starting school soon and I needed money for school. So I just kind of ran with it. This next question is also kind of related. It's what made me start crocheting flowers? And the answer is I actually started off making plushies. So I was on TikTok one day scrolling along, and I had seen a TikTok reel or a TikTok video from my friend Charlize where she had made an adorable plushie. And I kind of had a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, like I had only ever learned crochet from my grandma, that you could make scarves and sweaters and things like that. I had no idea that people were actually out there making adorable stuffed animals with it. So I saw the video and I thought to myself, let me just try it. So my first creation was this adorable velvet octopus that actually lives in my mom's car on her dashboard. I'll insert a picture of him here. And that's how it all started. So I basically worked on plushies for, I want to say, probably 1.5 years, and I ended up seeing crochet flowers and crochet bouquets from another creator on Instagram. Her ad is Crochet by Jazz, and I was really inspired by her work, and I thought, well, let me try some of those flowers myself. So I looked up a couple different YouTube patterns, and I eventually started making flowers and getting a lot of orders from them and a lot of attention just on my reels, and people were liking my posts and commenting. And I realized that there was almost more of a market for flowers than there was plushies, just because the crochet community was so saturated with how many people were making plushies. So I just started making flowers, making my own patterns, and flowers kind of just, like, this whole business in itself just kind of became its own thing, and now that's the majority of what I do. Those are pretty much the most asked questions. I'm gonna go ahead and read through the rest just to make sure that I didn't miss any. So let's see, how old was I? I was about 5 or 6. What made me pursue crochet business? It was never planned, it just kind of happened. Where do I get my stuff from? I'll have everything linked in the description below that I referenced in this specific video, but for all my other general supplies like yarn and stuff, I have everything linked on my Amazon storefront, so you guys can also read that in my description. How long have I been crocheting? I'm 24 now, so 24 minus 5 or 6. I'm not good at math, so you do the math. I was that many years old, and that's how long I've been crocheting. How to write a pattern, how to sell patterns, how to sell on Etsy, how do I package stuff, crochet must-haves. These are all amazing questions, and those are all actually video topics that I have planned for the future. So if that sounds interesting, then let me know and I can get started already on my very next video. And the last question that was asked is, what's your motivation to crochet? So as I was saying, I started crocheting when my grandma became sick, and my plan was to just have this as my hobby. And then people started ordering from me, and I started getting a lot of orders, and I was able to make money from this. So then this was all while I was working, and I thought to myself, okay, let me continue doing this and working full time and just see how it goes. And I actually was supposed to start law school last year, but unfortunately for personal reasons I had to defer. So my plan was just crochet for like 1 to 2 months, see what you can do, and then stop crocheting and go get a full-time job at like a law firm or something. But I realized that I actually could make more money and have more fun and more free time and less stress than I would at a real like full-time job with crochet. So I just kept going, and that's what I've been doing since August of 2021, which is when I started my crochet account. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this video was helpful. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave a comment below, or you can message me on Instagram at Sierra Stitches. Thank you so much for watching my very first YouTube video. It means a lot to me, and thank you to those who encouraged me to start this channel. Also, leave a comment below for what other types of content you'd like to see from me. Bye!